Thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast. This is Lauren, and I manage the Adulting is Easy blog and podcast, which can be found at realadultingiseasy.com and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please take a second and hit the follow button if you can safely do so. Today, I'm joined by Julien and Kiersten, authors of Cashing Out, Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away. They're also the creative voices behind the blog richandregular.com, producers of the award-winning video series Money on the Table, and hosts of the Rich and Regular podcast. Based in Atlanta, Georgia, their mission is to inspire conversations about money. The couple has used frugal living, real estate, stock market investing, and their online business to build wealth and ultimately achieve financial independence. They paid off $200,000 in 5 years, and their story has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, CBS This Morning, Marketwatch, and the Oprah Winfrey Network, and more. While they're not sharing stories about their experiences with money, they're parents of their son Beau, traveling the world, or searching for their next great meal. Thanks for joining me, Julien and Kiersten.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
I'm excited too. And before we jump in, I do want to let people know that this is responsive. See, I just messed up.
I jinxed you.
It's just weird. Okay. So this episode is sponsored by Jasmine Mortgage Team. Are you looking to cash out refinance? Jasmine Mortgage Team knows financing your real estate will pay big dividends to your net worth. Sign up for a free consultation with Jasmine Mortgage Team at jasminemortgageteam.com and tell them Lauren from Adulting is Easy sent you. That's jasminemortgageteam.com. Our goal for today is to make adulting a bit easier for listeners by discussing a personal finance topic, since managing money is a big part of adulting. So today, Julien and Kiersten and I, we're going to talk about cashing out. And why don't we start talking about what exactly is cashing out?
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're super excited about this episode, and that's actually a really great place to start, which is, what is cashing out? And a lot of people, when we say the term cashing out, tend to think of a casino. They tend to think of walking away from the big bet, from the big gamble when you're ahead. And that's kind of what we're getting at. I think when it comes to careers, most of us know that it's a game. We all laugh about the ridiculousness of corporate politics and what it takes to get ahead. But we still kind of build our careers and our financial plans as if it's a game that we can win. When the reality is very few people are able to accomplish that. There are only so many VP and CEO and CFO roles out there. And so cashing out is a financial blueprint that really just helps people realize that winning is actually being able to quit while you're ahead and walk away on your own terms. It's about the ability to leave a job or a situation that isn't serving you anymore and cash out.
We heard in your bio there that you've recently written a book called Cashing Out, Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away. Can you tell us why you wanted to write the book?
There are several reasons, obviously, starting with the
Hey, you guys are muted.
Hey.
When did that happen? That's so weird.
I don't know.
That's weird. Okay.
Do we need to start over? Or do you think you got my answer?
I'm so sorry. No, I got your answer.
Oh, okay.
What I didn't hear was Julien talking about why you decided to write the book.
Okay. Yeah, we can start over.
Okay.
At that point.
I am so sorry. That was really weird. Okay. I will cut this out, obviously. And
I'll keep my eyes on it now.
Jeez, you guys, I promise you, there's sometimes I don't even have to edit this beginning part. And I'm sure you don't believe me right now. So sorry about that.
No,
well, Mercury is in retrograde. There was an eclipse. This is some crazy stuff happening.
I appreciate you guys and your attitude and your ability to roll with this. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, this is great. So personally, there's certainly a layer of we wrote a book because it's a bit of a dream come true for us. Even before we met, we were both lovers of books and reading and telling stories. And so to be able to write a book and to be able to do it together, I think is obviously a dream come true for us. But I think when we start thinking about other people and what we want our book to do for those people, a lot of it goes back to when we really first started taking money and personal finance in our careers seriously. And we thought about the kind of books that we would want to read that were relevant for us as Black professionals with the aspirations that we had at the time, which were to retire early and achieve financial independence. And one of the things that we realized is that the rules were actually a little different for us, right? It's not to suggest that the messages that we offer in the book aren't for anyone that aren't Black or aren't African American. But we do know that given the world that we live in, given what we understand about the income gap, the wealth gap, but also just our experiences in the workplace, that the rules are a little different for us. And so we actually couldn't afford to just follow the standard rules of thumb. And we certainly couldn't afford to follow a lot of the standard career advice because it really wasn't working. And there was evidence to suggest that. And so we wanted to make sure that off the rules that so we wanted to make sure that not only we could share our own experience about how we were able to do it, but we could share the experience of others and provide a unique set of rules and approaches and strategies that I think a lot of people could tap into that would allow them to ultimately walk away from their jobs with their integrity and their financial life being secure.
Kiersten, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Perfect. So I thought you guys did an amazing job of doing just what you said, Julien, which is weave in other people's stories with your own. It was really seamless as I was reading it, and I really enjoyed that part of it. And I also liked the structure, how you had the rules and rituals, and that's rituals with the RICH. Can you tell us more about those and why you put those in there and kind of what the difference is between a rule and a ritual?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite parts of the book as well, because we wanted to make sure that there was nuance in the book. I think when I first found the personal finance kind of movement, fire movement, whatever you want to call it, I was under the assumption that these people were experts. I had given them guru status in my life, and I followed their frameworks, their rules, like to a T. And some of that led to deprivation for me. I just didn't agree with some of the rules. They were really hard to execute. And so we wanted to give people the option to, one, understand that there are some somewhat universal truths, some evergreen principles to finance that we do want to make sure that people are aware. In our book, those are the rules. Those are the hills that we're willing to die on. It's things like spend less than you make, pay yourself first, make sure that you're not putting your career above your livelihood, things like that. But then there's also room for you to check in with yourself, ask yourself some key questions, make sure that you're doing that inner work to decide what the right path for you ultimately is. And that's the rituals. The rituals are like the advice that you would get from a good friend. They're not gospel. They're not meant for you to, just apply carte blanche to your life. It's a question that you should ask yourself, and they're meant to be revisited. I think that's another thing that we miss in the personal finance space is that our values change over time. And the rituals kind of give you permission to be like, do I actually still believe this? Do I still want this? Do I still care how old I am when I quit working? All of those things are questions that you should ask yourself to make sure that yours is the loudest voice that you hear when you're creating your financial plan.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And in personal finance, you have these goals, and I think you can get kind of heads down trying to reach those goals. And it's an excellent idea to revisit them, revisit your values, and ask yourself these questions. I wanted these things 5 years ago. I
Right.
have my 5-year plan. Do I still want them now or not?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of us don't do that enough. We're still operating from an old rule book. We're still operating from an old playbook that may have worked for well-intentioned adults in your life. That may have been a great strategy for your mom or your auntie or, a grandparent, but it doesn't apply to the time that we're in and the obstacles that we're against, or just the decision that you want your life to go. So yeah, it's important to check back in.
Mm-hmm. Even the idea of cashing out would probably be a foreign idea to anyone that you would have been learning from growing up anyways, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if anything, it was like stay in and stay employed like as long as possible. Like the idea of being employable was at a high level was pretty much the ultimate life goal. But going back to one of our motivations around why we wanted to write the book, even as a young adult, as I would think about how many people I knew that actually were able to retire successfully or retire in the way that a lot of these financial magazines or websites would show. It was like, I didn't really know anyone that actually was able to do that. Most of the people that I know, I would say, retired unsuccessfully. They retired and they actually still had to work, or they retired and they, were reliant on their family to help financially support them, or they were still working a side job to help cover their medical bills or something like that. And so there was just very little evidence to suggest that the standard rules of thumb were working, at least in my life and around any of the people that I knew. And that's when we said, this is a much bigger problem than we thought, right? It wasn't just the people in our lives and in our communities. This was something that was systemic. And so we wanted to make sure that we did our part based on what we knew to be true, based on what we tried and had applied to our lives, but also to your point around some of the things that others have done so that other people can find their own paths and pick and choose to identify what works for them.
Right. That's when I think people do the best with personal finance, is when you take in some information, although not too much. I think you can kind of get to this point where you're taking in a little bit too much information, but learn, and then put together all of the important parts, right? The rules, the rituals, take it all together and put together a plan that works for you logistically with your life, but also with who you are as a person and what your values are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I think more of us need to apply that critical thinking and personalization to our financial plans. And again, before there were so many content creators and people like you and us creating channels that have people tell their stories, you had to go to an advisor to get someone to listen to your hopes and dreams and then kind of craft into a plan for you. And now what we're trying to teach people is that there's been a paradigm shift. You can actually do that on your own. You can still go to an advisor, but you need to have a strong point of view on what you want your life to look like and how you want it to feel while you're executing all of these big plans to make sure that you create something that is reasonable.
Right. And you need to have enough knowledge and understanding to know to ask questions, even of advisors and experts in your life,
Absolutely.
or to look critically at what the gurus are saying too, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's more information available than there ever has been, right? And that will probably always be true from now on. So how long do you think it takes from when you kind of decide you want to cash out, or, and let me ask this too. Once you have the ability to cash out, how I think about it is you don't really have to. It's just kind of nice to have that option, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the amount of time that it takes is going to differ widely, right? I think in the book we said something to the effect of your mileage may vary, right? So everyone's spending habits or requirements are different. Everyone's cost of living is different. For us, it took about a little over 10 years. And quite honestly, the rationale for why I left the workforce was very different from the rationale behind, or the motivations behind why Kiersten was able to walk away. And so everyone's situation is going to be a little bit different. What we did do in the book is to identify what a reasonable timeline might look like. And I think that's really important because going back to my own experience and what I found was something that a lot of people struggle with is they don't really walk into their careers with a realistic expectation of what it's going to be like. Americans are very optimistic, which is difficult to say given how much trouble there is out there in the world. But by and large, I think we're still very optimistic. We believe that we are always going to earn as much money as we're earning now or more for the foreseeable future. We all think that we have the potential to be upwardly mobile. And a lot of those things impact our careers and obviously our spending habits. What we're actually asking people to do is to begin with the end in mind and to say, all right, well, what is the minimum amount of time that we can actually spend in our jobs where we are absolutely required to work? And what are some of the things that we can do in our financial lives and in our careers to ensure that after that minimum amount of time, we have options that are available to us. And that number for us was around 15 years. And so the idea was to create a framework, which we call the 15-year career, that basically walk people through what a debt elimination plan might look like, what investing might look like, and how bouncing around in their careers with the intent of learning skills that they can monetize both inside and outside of the job would allow you to optimize your income and as a result, be able to have far more options available to you than most workers have. And the combination of all of those activities, if you follow that framework, I think puts a lot of people in a position where after 15 years, they can decide whether or not they still want to work. They can decide to downshift and say, you know what, I still want to work, but I don't know that I want to do this high stress job anymore. I want to transition to something that I actually enjoy, or something that might be more meaningful for me, or more community focused. And I think all of those reasons are valid. It could be for personal reasons. It could be for health reasons. Any reason, I think, is a valid one for a lot of people. But what's most important is giving yourself and putting yourself in a position where that is an option for you, as opposed to experiencing some type of career disruption and being left in financial disarray.
I think if I heard the term 15-year career 5 years ago, I would have said, you're nuts.
Yeah.
Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when we were writing the proposal for our book, which was in early 2020, pre-pandemic, we thought this was an extreme idea too. Like, it was before all of the shifts, and we were trying to figure out how to position it in a way that made it feel less extreme. Fast forward 2 years, the Great Resignation has happened. A lot of remote work has happened. These new trends like being overemployed, where people work multiple remote jobs, have happened. And now this idea feels like this is a conservative bet, right? This is a conservative idea in some areas. It depends on your field and your industry. Have to hedge a little bit. But this could be conservative for a generation like Gen Z, who doesn't plan to work very long at all, who knows what they're there for. They want to get in and cash out and start to enjoy their lives and really take advantage of their time.
Right. And the key, like Julien said, is beginning with the end in mind. I don't think you're going to start working, start your career, and then find yourself in 15 years naturally able to retire. That
Right.
may happen. But having a plan and knowing how you want to attack that makes all of the difference in the world. So I loved how you guys broke it down. Do you want to talk a little bit how those 15 years break down?
Yeah, so it's broken down into 3 5-year sprints, if you will. The first 5 years is really just focused on paying off your debt, paying it off aggressively, making sure that you don't enter the paycheck to paycheck cycle, doing everything possible to adopt frugal habits into your life as a great foundation, a great financial foundation for the rest of your career. And then the second 5 years is really about finding your superpower and building skills. As much as we criticize corporate America for a lot of the lack of diversity and equity and wage growth challenges, what they are really good at is being a training ground. If you have a corporate job or a professional job, it's often where we learn key skills about presenting, interviewing. You have access to training and curriculum from some of the best universities and research centers across the world. You also get to go to conferences and network with people inside and outside of your field. And so what we're suggesting in the second half of, or the second 5 years of your 15-year career, is that you really take advantage of that stuff. You find out what you're good at. You do all the strengths assessments. You collect the feedback. You focus in on the skills that are valuable. And then in the last 5 years, it's really about building an escape hatch. It's learning how you can monetize those skills, both inside your company and outside of your company, and learning how you can monetize those skills without the need of working with an institution like a workplace at all. Checking to see what the value of those skills is in the open marketplace, learning how to build different income streams, applying those skills to different investment asset classes. So you may be a great project manager at work, but that also means you might be a great real estate investor, because some of those skills are necessary for managing contractors and other people involved in real estate deals. So it's really about figuring out what life looks like without this job. It doesn't mean that at the end of the last 5 years, you have to quit your job. It doesn't mean that you have to leave and retire. It just means that you now have the confidence of knowing that you can earn income outside of this labor agreement, and learning what that means for you.
I think what might surprise people is that there is, even in a 15-year career, room to start from basically negative with the debt. And I think that should be really heartening to people.
Sorry, we were both about to talk. Yeah, that's how we started. And again, the 15-year career isn't meant to start counting as soon as you graduate from college, or you can decide that the 15-year sprint is going to happen at any point in your career. The math and the skill sets kind of work the same, whether you're 25 and deciding you got 15 years or you're 45 and deciding that you have 15 years. But 5 years of aggressive debt payoff is usually enough to put a dent in whatever debt you're facing. Even if you have several hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt, if you're focused on it, if you make it a priority among your financial plan, after 5 years, you can put a significant dent in that balance.
Absolutely. And then I love the superpower part. And I thought you guys did an amazing job of telling people that a 9 to 5 is not naturally this evil thing. You don't have to be miserable doing it. And it really can help you outside of that. I even think about myself where I've been in sales for 8 years. And so much of sales is having conversations with people, listening, taking notes, and asking questions like what I'm doing right now. I don't think I'd be able to do this had I never been in sales, for example. So I love that portion of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really been the secret to our success. And as we've interviewed and had our own conversations about money and career with people, we've actually helped them realize, well, yeah, that was your superpower. This was the skill that you developed when you were in that particular role. And now as an entrepreneur, this is how you're applying it. And I think for most people, but especially professionals, they have that experience. They just kind of need to walk through some exercises that might actually help them to do that. And I think secondly, it really, really helps to have a role model, someone who's done it to help show them what it might actually look like. You use the example of being in sales. I don't know why my mind went to this, but like 10 years ago, we happen to live just outside of Atlanta. 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have thought that I had the potential to enter into the film industry, right? The film industry wasn't even really that large here in Atlanta. But over the last 10 years, the state of Georgia has become a really, really huge center for film production. There are tons of people that I know that are working on certain skills right now where their industry might be hurting, but the skills that they're developing might actually put them in a really great position to enter into that industry. And so whether it's transitioning from one industry into another that you maybe never thought that you could find yourself in, or it's learning those particular skills and putting it out there on websites like Fiverr or applying it into entrepreneurial endeavors or side hustles, I just think it's really important for people to extract as much value from the skills that they've already developed and to not limit themselves just to one employer or to earning opportunities between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m.
And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier is revisit things, reflect on things. I think it's easy to get into your career and not take a step back and realize what skills do I have? What skills do I need? What skills do I want? And even kind of evaluating yourself a little bit. Because again, you can just get so heads down if you let yourself.
Absolutely.
And then the last part, the escape hatch. I read the questions in your book, which are 1, am I happy at my job? 2, am I disregarding other areas of my life that are important to me? And 3, what would I do if the market crashed tomorrow? Again, that was the reflection. That was the reflection that I need. And I think a lot of people, because I would say that I'm in kind of those last 5 years. And again, it's this idea, this theme that we're seeing throughout this conversation of reflecting and thinking. And I think that's amazing. Did you guys ask yourself those questions as you were kind of thinking about cashing out?
We did. We absolutely did. I know I did for sure because the question that I was asking myself before, which is, do I have enough money? How are we going to pay bills? Who's going to, am I going to lose my house? Those were not helpful in actually making me come to a conclusion that I felt good about. And so when I asked myself these more open-ended questions that caused me to reflect on the life that I wanted to build, how I wanted to spend my days, I got much closer to an answer that eventually allowed me to turn in my resignation to say, yes, I think I can be a better wife, mother, daughter, friend, neighbor if I didn't have to spend 45 hours, 50 hours a week doing this job. And once I understood that, once I understood the other side of the coin that had something to kind of compare the things that I was afraid of, I got the clarity that I was looking for that couldn't come from a calculator or from a bank balance or anything else like that.
Yeah, and I think for me, that second question was really, really important excuse me. I think for me, that second question was actually most important. The idea of like, am I disregarding other areas of my life? You know, when I decided to walk away from my job, it was because I was actually in a situation where I was being faced with bullying and racism and just some really, really poor treatment under a bad leader. And it really forced me to say, like, all right, if I were to just accept this treatment in exchange for the continued security of a steady paycheck, like what impact does that have on my ability to, like, does that mean I'm going to come home and be an angrier husband? Does that mean that I'm going to take all of this negative energy and somehow just have less energy to then give to my son, who at the time was only 1 or 2 years old, and all he really wanted was to kind of play with his dad? And so I really did some deep digging, I should say. And I think there are a lot of people that deal with that, like regardless of the issues that you have in the workforce, you really have to like think about like, all right, what am I, like, what other impacts is this going to have? Because more often than not, these aren't just financial decisions. And so I think those are just another set of reasons why people really should consider like putting an end cap on their careers and not just assuming that it will always be a smooth, sunny ride to the top, because you're more than likely you're going to be faced with some type of disruption. And unfortunately, a lot of the ugliness that we see out here in broader society tend to pop up and show up in our workforce. And as much as we tell ourselves that we don't bring those things home, it's really, really difficult to do.
No, you're absolutely right. There are some times when I will snap at my husband or something like that. And when I really think about why that is, it's because of something that's going on at my job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. That's,
no.
that's very real. And, you know, I think for a lot of, I don't know how many fathers there are out there that are probably listening, but, you know, one of the things I really struggled with as a new father was being the type of father, like I deliberately did not want to be the type of father that my father was. And my father wasn't like an absolutely horrible father, but I wanted to be present. I also wanted to be helpful, right? Like I cook, I do all the cooking at home. And so like the downstream effect of me not being able to bring like my best self home and to be a partner that sort of shares in the responsibilities around the home, or like just being able to equally support our son who needed us at a really at that point in time, and still needs us now, but like obviously when he was younger it was just really important. It was powerful for us to be able to say, you know what, we actually don't need this job right now. At that point we were at year 10 and we were like, you know what, we've done a really good job of, we completely eliminated our debt, we've been investing consistently. And that's when the light bulbs really started to go off for us. It was like, actually we have put ourselves in a position where we can walk away from this situation. We can cash out. And that's exactly what we did. And I think that's what we want for a lot of other people out there. We want everyone to be empowered to walk away for any set of reasons that are relevant to them at that moment in time, compared to what most people are dealing with right now, which is they just kind of accept mistreatment. They accept that stress. They downplay it and say that it's just part of the experience. When in reality, you know, you'd be much happier if you'd removed yourself from those situations.
And it's more socially, excuse me, it's more socially acceptable to be in one of those long-term secure jobs too. So how do you guys handle, or how did you handle maybe cashing out and not having those jobs and explaining it to people and things like that?
I think we had the benefit of being a little older. And so we know that there are things that we collectively believed and supported as a society that just went away eventually, right? We believed that we would be on the right side of history. There was enough data at the time that we were writing this book and making these decisions that suggested that long-term exposure in workplaces could lead to stress and poor health outcomes and families falling apart. And so we had that data on our side, although it was not well publicized. We knew that like the data was suggesting that this was a trend, very much like smoking on airplanes and, leaving children in hot cars, that we would eventually as a society say is no longer acceptable. And I think we're getting closer to that. I think the Great Resignation and other workplace trends are kind of articulating that like at some point, American citizens will start to advocate for employer rights. And again, we're seeing that happen now. And what we always laugh about, excuse me, sorry, Lauren. What we always laugh about is that it is completely likely that you can be living through a movement and not know it, right? We always look back at the civil rights movement and we assume that the whole country was marching like Selma was, or that the whole country was halted during the war. And we know for a fact that that wasn't the case. People were going on living their everyday lives as the literal fabric of our country was changing. And I think that's true with labor movements right now. We're seeing strikes. We're seeing people leave without a plan. We're seeing young people already clearly articulate to employers that they're not going to work under the same conditions that people before them did. And we're all kind of just moving around like, all right, well, let's just see what happens. But if you're savvy enough, you can say, you know what, something's changing. I want to be at the forefront of this. And that means I need to do something different with my finances.
Absolutely. And so you should ask these questions, these reflection questions. Am I happy at my job? Am I disregarding other areas of my life? And then you can get into do we have enough money? Can I pay my bills? Can I do it? Right. And then kind of think of that kind of after you do the reflecting, and then but I guess at this point, if those are reflection questions for like the last 5 years, right? You've been asking those all along.
Absolutely.
You know that you've been investing in, that you've been saving, that you've been doing the right thing.
Yeah, and you might need to just ask yourself a different question. If you've been asking these questions year after year after year, and you keep hitting a wall and you keep kind of starting back over, and you feel like you're stuck in a cycle, this is where coaches, content creators, and community come in, because they can give you a different set of questions to ask yourself. It's not a matter of like, do I have enough money? It's how can I start to market my skills so that money is not an issue, that earning income outside of, again, this labor agreement that I have to exchange 50 hours of my time every single week with no breaks. Is there a way that I can earn income in a way that still supports my family and I don't have to worry about it? Can I build a cash runway? Just other questions that help you move past the yes or no, black or white binary thinking that we tend to get caught in.
That is gold. Ask different questions. And if you're stuck, get somebody else to ask you questions. There's so many people that can give you an outside perspective kind of on your own life. And I'm sure they ask you questions and you're like, duh, what an obvious question. And you know what? I have the answer to that. And I've seen that happen a little bit on spaces here and there, like with my friend Tom, our friend Tom, I should say, where he started joining the spaces, and whatever happened was somebody said something in a space and that was it. He put in his notice and he was done. And he just needed to hear kind of that one thing.
Yeah, that's where I was in 2019. I attended a conference for women called Sense Positive. They haven't had one since, but there was a conference and I was talking about my desire to quit my job with a bunch of strangers. Like I knew 4 or 5 people in the room, but I was just like venting and kind of like rambling. And someone looked at me and they said, you have to quit your job. I listened to your talk. The world needs to hear your message. And you should be focusing on that full time. You have to quit. And I was just like, what? You don't even know me. But I still remembered that advice. It played in my head for years and years and years, and it still does, as I think about like whether I made the right choice or not. And so, yeah, it's important to add to the chorus of voices in your head that you play back when times get hard or when you feel like you're stuck.
Add to the chorus of voices. Love it. So what advice do you have for listeners who are just now even learning about this idea of cashing out, and that a 15-year career actually is an attainable thing?
Congratulations. One, it's great that you're open-minded to this concept. But my advice is to find community, to not try to tackle this alone, to use the tools of the internet and different meetup opportunities and conference opportunities to find like-minded people. Because I think what's natural is that when we find an idea that we love, we rush to tell our friends and family. And if they are skeptical or may not be in the place where you are, they may say something that has you second guessing what you just believed was an incredible idea, an hour ago. And so what community does is it kind of helps to give you the support that you need at the time that you need it. Your friends and family may not be your biggest cheerleaders in this endeavor, but that's not a reason to pursue it. There are lots of people strangers often that can say the right thing to you to keep you going when things get, again, tough. Because we don't want to assume that like 15 years is just easy peasy. Like there's going to be tough moments, and you need a group of people that help you think creatively and out of the box to get through it.
I think the advice I would give is something that we've said all the time, and it's also in our book, and it's that your title will not be on your tombstone, right? I think so much, especially in American culture, so much of our identity is tied to work and our ability to progress in work and to feel loved and appreciated and valued at work. But the reality is many people don't actually feel loved and valued at work. To Kirsten's point, we all really kind of casually and privately accept that this is a game. And unfortunately, it's a game that only few people can actually win. And so what we're helping people realize is that we've got to widen the possibilities of what winning looks like. And I think for most people, a realistic and really great way of winning is being able to walk away from the game at your peak. You don't want to be like that prized fighter. We think about boxers who are always sort of caught up in, oh man, I still have a little bit more fight in me, or athletes who just always feel like, oh man, I'm going to keep on playing until my body breaks down. We don't have to do that. We can actually play the game a little differently. And instead of kind of playing to win, as we traditionally have, you kind of play to quit. And I think by redefining what winning looks like, it puts you in a much better and a much more empowered place to be, and in a situation where you can place time and energy into some of the other parts, more important parts of your life, like your family, your relationships, and supporting a local community.
Well said. I can't follow that up with anything. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up?
No, well, not for me.
No, I think we're good.
All right. Why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you?
All right. So if you're interested in buying Cashing Out, you can find it anywhere books are sold. It launches on June 14th, and we want it in as many hands as possible. If you want to keep up with us and our shenanigans, you can find us at richandregular.com, or on all of the socials. Our handle is Rich and Regular.
All right. And I will, as usual, that will all be in the show notes. So it's in the show notes right now, listeners. You can find me on Twitter at adultingiseasy. I'm also on Facebook. You can email me at realadultingiseasy@gmail.com. Also, I'm trying to join other personal finance podcasts. So if you have any recommendations, do let me know. Sometimes it's fun for me to be a guest too. Don't forget to join Wealth Wednesday Twitter Spaces at 9 o'clock Eastern. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Hopefully, Kiersten, Julien, and I have made adulting a little easier for you.